Hey, we're in part 2 of our This Is What We Do series. Last week I mentioned I've had so many conversations over the last few weeks just kind of centered around people that are starting to get worried about money. We're just seeing it all over the place. The prices on everything is rising. We're watching the global impact of the conflict that's happening over in the Ukraine, and just kind of our general natural tendency is when things start getting more and more expensive or things start getting uncertain, it's easy to, kind of tighten the belts and hunker everything down. There's a kind of a scarcity mindset. There's not enough, and so we just hold on to everything that we can. And so I think this is a timely message as we're just exploring together God's design and God's plan for your finances. We talked last week that it's also really easy to get nervous about talking about money in church. So I set this up last week. I want to do it again just so you know, put all the cards on the table, what my agenda for this series is. I said it last week. I want you to be financially free, living under God's plan, not man's plan. I want you to be blessed, and I want you to be a blessing to others. And number 3, I want to change the narrative for our young adults and for our kids. I think it's especially important that we start teaching them now how to live out good, healthy, sound principles. Well, why tell you that? Because I want you to be rest assured that my focus is on you. Nothing else matters to me than you walking in God's plan for your life. And so this series is really just a coffee conversation. Everybody got your coffee? You got your tea? I got my peach green tea. It's one of my new favorites. I love it. We're just having coffee, sitting across the table. I'm not preaching. We're just talking, having a conversation. I just want to share with you some important things. This is an important conversation because our money is one of our most fundamental issues when it comes to our faith. I said this last week. It's a discipleship issue. So we need to talk about it. We need to learn. We need to grow in God's ways. We're not going to compartmentalize faith and our money. These are actually intertwined things. Last week, we talked about the first principle. We're talking about 3 principles over these 3-week series. Last week, we said this: the first thing that we have to do is we have to put God first. The first things come first. To get our financial lives in order, we have to put everything else in the right order. Everything else in a healthy, Christ-following, growing discipleship life starts with putting God first, and that is true with our finances as well. We're going to obey, and we're going to start by putting God first with the tithe, the first 10% of our income, the tithe, our first fruits, giving back to God. We're going to obey with the 10% and then trust God with the 90%. We're going to take him at his word when he says he provides. But it all starts with obedience and trust with that first 10%. We put God first. Go watch. If you missed it last week, if you didn't get a chance to be with us in the room, I'd encourage you, go watch it. I think it's a challenging, encouraging message. I want you to be just growing. I want us to be obedient. I want us to build off this foundation so we can jump into this second principle. That's what we're talking about today. We're not just understanding the why and the what about tithing. The second principle that I want us to build for This Is What We Do is this: that we're faithful with obedience and we're patient for provision. That's where we're going today. We're faithful with obedience and we're patient for provision. I texted with our oldest son, Logan, this week. He's down at St. Olaf College, his freshman year of school, and we were talking about prices on everything, and we're trying to figure out a time to go visit, spend some time with him, and he says, "Oh, I know gas prices are up. You don't have to come down." Like, he's here. Does he still get the $5 whenever I bring him up? Bruce, is that the rule? That's still the rule, so I got to give him $5? Shoot, that's a gallon of gas. Yeah, we were talking about the prices of gas. He sent me this meme he found earlier in the week. I couldn't help but share it. Why don't we throw this up on the screen here, the photo that I sent him. This is from Will Smith's movie, I Am Legend. I don't recommend that movie. I can't handle it. It's too stressful. I don't know if the zombie apocalypse drove up prices or if they were high before the zombie apocalypse, but this makes the point. There's the movie back in 2007 on the top. You can see the price of a regular gallon of gas was $6.63. And the bottom picture was taken last week in California, $6.65. We get this amazing moment of life imitating art. Like, how bad does it get? Well, it's pretty bad. It's worse than a zombie apocalypse up there, everybody. Hold on. It's what many of us feel, though, is we feel that life is disrupted, and it's so easy to worry. It's so easy to try and control, especially when it comes to our finances. But if we can live and if we can learn out these principles, they'll help us experience supernatural peace and provision. And we said last week, I'll say it again this week, I think we need this now more than ever. Multiple things can be true at the same time, right? We can experience fear and we can try to control and we can experience worry. And we also want to live up to our core value that says we give. It's central to our identity as a church and as Christ followers that we're givers. You'll hear me say something like this often. We want to lead the way. This is right from our core values. We want to lead the way in spirit-led, irrational generosity. This is what we do. We like the generosity part because that's fun. But we said last week the order in which we do things matters. So we have to learn how to be faithful and be patient. What do I mean? Oftentimes, I think the tension that we find ourselves in is we want to control, especially when it comes to our finances, we want to control it so that we have it our way. We're so accustomed to life being personalized to us. If you grew up in the 80s, where are my 80s kids at? Okay, you're awesome, by the way, because we grew up in the 80s. If you grew up watching TV in the 80s, you probably remember that in the 80s, Burger King changed the fast food world for forever. Yeah, let's take a step back. Why was McDonald's so successful? Because you can go to McDonald's in Florida, and you can go to McDonald's in California, and you could have the exact same food. That's what revolutionized McDonald's, right? Fast food, it was the same no matter where you went. They made the same thing, the same product everywhere, exactly the same way. But what did Burger King do? Well, you can have it your way. Changed the world. An entire advertising campaign was spent enticing you with that phrase, you can have it your way. Fast food was now customizable. Now everything is customizable. I'm not going to buy a new car, but I love to go on like Ford or BMW or whomever's website and start flipping through and designing cars. I want that option. I'm getting some nods. I want that option. I want that. Ooh, that color looks really nice. Like, I like that. I like the customizable piece of it. We're so used to getting our way, we're shocked when we don't. Like, there's a whole entire species of people that the millennials have deemed Karens. I'd like to speak to your manager, please. Why? So I can have it my way. We're so used to it. And the trap that we can fall into, it's easy to treat God like we should get everything we want. Like we should get it our way, when we want it, how we want it, with all of our personal preferences baked right in. I don't think we intend to treat our relationship with God that way, but we're so used to having our way, sometimes we don't know any other way. God, this is what I want you to do. Here's the need that I have. Here's how you're going to fill it. Here's when I'd like this by. Here's the timetable. Oh, and I want that new job so that I can travel and I can have that perfect Instagram life. Oh, and that relationship, you need to work in it because I don't like it. I don't need to change, so you need to change it for me. Oh, and I know I'm not tithing, but if you could show up in my finances, well, that'd be great. If you show up in my finances and make a real difference, well, then I'll start giving. It's so easy to get the order wrong. We don't mean to do it, but it happens. And we can allow fear and worry and envy and greed to get us mixed up, and the order starts getting all messed up. But we put the principle into practice. We put God first. So to build off that foundation, we have to start with that. And we have to start with that now. But then it's not just a one-time thing. We have to continue with our obedience. That's the first point, the first sub-principle today. We have to be faithful with our obedience. The foundation for faithful obedience is the tithe, and it's that obedience that leads to blessing. It's more than just a one-time thing. So we're going to be faithful. It's going to be ongoing. We're going to see the ongoing demonstration of God's faithfulness in provision as we walk out ongoing faithfulness in our obedience. Last week we said that tithing was our practical demonstration of our trust in God. Tithing demonstrates that we understand that God owns everything. Tithing says to God that you're the source of everything. It's all yours. I don't control any of this. It's less about the money and all about the posture of our hearts. Moses wrote this in Deuteronomy 14. The purpose of tithing is to teach you to do what? Always put God first. It got quiet in that moment of audience participation. I'm going to read that again. Maybe you'd want to read that out loud with me, that part. The purpose of tithing is to teach you to do what? Always put God first in your lives. Tithing honors God, and it demonstrates obedience in a space that we're really quick to take control of. Because God honors and blesses obedience, we're not going to hold back. It teaches us to put God first in an area of life that's so easy to take back control. Faithful obedience is giving trust back to God and saying, your way, not my way. Your way, not my way. And tithing is probably the most tangible way to show that we trust God. But learning how to be patient with God's timing on provision is another thing. Learning how to be patient with God's timing on provision is another. So we're first going to walk out faithful obedience, and then we're going to be patient with provision. Do you like how I slowed down right there? We're going to be patient with provision, because right here it's easy to get tripped up. This is the step where it's easy to get tripped up. Maybe you hear the word provision and all of your alarm bells go off. Jim's talking about money in church. He's talking about provision. Oh no, is this one of those churches that's all about prosperity? I think there's a major difference. If you've been a part of our church for any number of years, you've heard me say this before. I believe there's a major difference between the poverty gospel, prosperity gospel, and provision gospel. Prosperity gospel says, I'm blessed and highly favored. Okay, now that's true. You are blessed and highly favored. But here's where it gets twisted up. I'm blessed and highly favored, and because of that, God is obligated to give me what I want. Now that's gross. That's gross. That's transactional. God doesn't owe us anything. He's not obliged to give us anything. But there's a nugget of truth in there. You are blessed and highly favored. Poverty gospel swings all the way to the other end of the spectrum. Poverty gospel says, I'm blessed and highly favored. But in order to please God, I have to give away everything I have, so I have nothing. Everything I have to give it away so that I have nothing. It's a twist of Jesus' words when he said to the rich young man in Matthew 19, Jesus told him, if you want to be perfect, go and sell all your possessions and give your money to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. Now, that's a quote from Jesus, so he must mean what he says, right? It's too easy to make the leap from Jesus telling this specific man, look, money and possessions are a barrier for you following me, and assume that that means that has to be applied to everybody blanket. Jesus is warning us about the principle of loving money and possessions. That's the barrier for that rich young man, the love of those things. Paul teaches his friend Timothy about that in another well-known verse, 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have done what? They've wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. There's a lot right there in that statement. The love of money, not money itself, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. This is the danger that Jesus is warning us about in Matthew chapter 6. We're going to go back and look at Matthew chapter 6 because I think it's an important conversation. But I just want to make it really clear. I don't believe in prosperity gospel nor poverty gospel. Neither one of those things, I think, is a full gospel. I believe in provision gospel, that if we faithfully obey, that God provides. Let's pick up where we left off last week in Matthew chapter 6. Jesus is teaching us about the principle of putting God first. It's all about having things in the right order. If the order is wrong, then what we're doing is we're making an idol out of something. And in this conversation, Jesus is telling us that we're making an idol out of money. Matthew 6:33, this is the verse we looked at last week. Seek the kingdom of God above all else. So put God first. Live righteously. That's faithful obedience right there. And then he's going to give you everything you need. The context here is about food and clothing and shelter. Putting Jesus first, obeying what he says, he provides the things that we need. So in order to move this conversation forward, we have to understand that there's a major difference between scarcity and provision. There's a major difference between scarcity and provision, and it comes down to what's in our heart. It's an ownership question. Let me show you what I mean. Whether you live under a scarcity mindset or a provision mindset, everything starts off from the very same place. It's just whether you recognize it or not. It's that God provides. That's the first spot. God provides. It's easy to look at our workplace. Actually, we're too early on that slide, buddy. We don't need to have that one up yet. Thank you. It's easy to look at our job as provision. It's easy to look at our bank accounts as our provision. It's easy to look at our 401ks as our provision. It's easy to look at all of those things as the source of our provision versus the channel for our provision. The channel that God uses to provide is your job. The channel that God uses to provide is your 401k. But scarcity says something different. Scarcity says there's never enough, and so I have to control everything. I'm waiting for the scarcity hammer to drop in 2022. In 2020, what was the scarcity item to get? Toilet paper. 2 years to the month, actually 2 years to the day, today is when we made the decision to shut down and only have church online, March 13th, 2020. Isn't that wild? Toilet paper. You remember the pictures. People getting those big flats at Costco with 27,000 rolls of toilet paper, and then they were selling them on Amazon Marketplace for $18,000. You remember that? That was just 2 years ago. It feels like a different life. Last year, this is crazy. Do you remember what it was last year? Do you remember people hoarding gas in 2021? I don't remember what happened, but there was you'd see lines of people filling up garbage cans full of gasoline. I remember seeing a news report of one lady who drove up and she was filling black lawn leaf garbage bags full of gasoline. And then she was surprised when one of them broke and there was a spark and her truck burned up. So I'm waiting in this season what 2022 brings for hoarding and scarcity. Why do we do that? Because of a scarcity mindset. There's never enough. We feel like we have to control how provision is going to line up. The statement on scarcity is it's all up to us. That's the mindset. What we have is never enough, so we have to protect it. We can't do this or we can't do that because we have to hold on for dear life. Scarcity causes us to turn inward, to focus on ourselves. Well, I'm the source of provision because I'm doing all of the work, and therefore I own everything and I have to control everything. Craig Rochelle calls this the scarcity cycle. I love this teaching. Now we can throw that slide up. The scarcity cycle says this. It recognizes it or doesn't recognize it. It all starts with God providing at the top. And then what happens? Well, because we're in control of everything and we're in charge of everything, then we consume everything that we have. We talked about that last week. Spend every penny that you make. Don't have a plan is just a bad plan. We consume. And then what happens? As soon as we consume, then we have this irrational fear of lack. We lack, and so we have to strive, and we have to work, and we have to try and figure it out. We go into more and more debt. And then what happens? We fear. Things are getting short. We start hoarding toilet paper. We fear, and then the cycle starts over. God, I need you to show up. We wonder how things get out of control. We're in so much fear. And because God's faithful, he provides. And we just get stuck in this scarcity cycle over and over and over. This is what Jesus is teaching us in Matthew chapter 6. He's warning us, where are we focusing our attention? Is it focusing on him, or is it focusing on money and possessions? Is our love, our devotion, our attention, our focus, our priority, is it on him, or is it on money? So let's back up and get the context of that seek the kingdom of God above all else verse. Let's start in 19. Jesus says this, don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them and where thieves break in and steal. Verse 20, store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust can't destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Here's a line, so many of us have this verse memorized. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. What's the point that Jesus is making right here? You can't have a divided heart. He's warning us, saying your heart's either here on earth or your heart is in heaven. Where's the devotion? Where's the focus? Where's the attention? We can't have a divided heart. It's one or the other. And he doubles down. Jesus takes us a step farther. He starts talking about the love of money. There's a warning that's about to drop, and it's a big one because it's connected to the why. Well, why is that, Jesus? Why is wherever our treasure is, the desires of our hearts will be? Verse 24, no one can serve two masters. And he sets up a paradigm between the two of them. You're going to hate one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. And here's the warning, you cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. You can't have a divided heart. You're always going to choose one or the other. That's the warning. So you're either going to drift toward earth or you're going to drift toward heaven. You can't drift. It's an intentional choice. You can't have a divided heart. That's the warning. You can't serve two diametrically opposed forces. The warning there is connected to the spirit of money. Literally, the last word that's used in the Greek sentence there for money is the Greek word mammon. Who's heard that word before? The spirit of mammon. You cannot serve both God and mammon. What is that? It's the spirit of money, the spirit of that love of wealth, that focus, the spirit of wealth, the spirit of control, the spirit of self-reliance. Jesus is saying it's impossible to serve him and a spirit of prosperity. They're diametrically opposed to one another. It's not the money itself, it's the love of the spirit of money that's the problem. That's the trap. Getting so wrapped up into money that it wraps us up completely. That spirit messes us up. It gets us twisted about money and scarcity and provision. The spirit of mammon attaches itself to money and possessions, and it influences us to trust it instead of God. There's the problem. Why is that a problem? I'm actually asking. That's idolatry. That's idolatry. When it influences us to trust it instead of God, the problem is that is idolatry. That spirit being so wrapped up in it gets us all twisted and life gets out of order. That's that spirit that gets us into debt. Well, God, your provision isn't good enough, so I'm going to go into debt to provide for myself. When we listen to that spirit, we start saying things like this: I need it, I want it, and I deserve it. Even if I can't afford it, I'm just going to give in and get it. And then what happens, the spirit of mammon starts comparing other people. It's one of the traps, especially in social media. Well, they're buying the car, or they just bought the house, or they're going on the trip, or Pastor Jim's got some fresh J's on today. Because we get so wrapped up in the love of money, loving the spirit of mammon, It doesn't matter that I'm going to be paying 28% on it for the next 25 years. It doesn't matter that I'm going to be paying such a ridiculous interest rate on it. If I would have paid cash, I could have bought 4 of them. I want it. So I'm going to make it happen in my timing because I'm in control. That's idolatry. That's the distrust. That's the catch that gets us. We're wrapped up in the spirit of the love of money. I'm not against having things. Things are fun. If they're not, you're doing it wrong. That's funny. You can laugh. It's okay. Things are fun. They're supposed to be fun. God isn't against you having things, but he is against your things having you. Okay, that's an important thing. God isn't opposed to you having things, but he is against you having your things having you. The rich young ruler who met Jesus face to face, how can I be perfect in following you? He chose to trust his own riches rather than putting his trust in Jesus. He turned away and walked away sad because of the love of money. The world tells us that money matters more than everything else. Get yours. Get paid. Have the life. You can have it your way. Jesus warns us against greed and tells us that life is so much more than material possessions. Trusting in wealth makes us slaves. Trusting in God makes us family. Trusting in God's timing with provision breaks that scarcity cycle. Trusting God with the tithe moves us from scarcity to abundance. Scarcity says there's never enough. Provision says it's all his anyway, so I'm just going to trust. It changes the cycle. It flips us from our lack and our self-control over to God's abundance. The cycle looks completely different. It all starts with God provides. Okay, God, it's all his. God provides. And so we give back. We give cheerfully. It's his anyways. And then as we add our part, then God multiplies it. Like, it'd be really easy for us to compare our $3,800 offering for Speed the Light and Convoy of Hope and go, oh, well, at, $500 a pop for we're buying bulletproof vests and helmets. And so at about $500 a pop, well, that didn't go very far. But we're faithful with our part, and then we added it, and there's like $500,000 plus that are going over. Like, we're a part of what God is doing. See the principle there? We add our part, and then God multiplies it. We're part of something bigger. We give, God multiplies, and then we get to see our faith grow as we step out and do something amazing. It's already been so much fun hearing stories of people start stepping out in faith this week in God provision. I can't wait for you to hear more about that. We give, God multiplies, and we see God go to work for us, and our faith grows, and then we give, and it just keeps going. God provides, we give, God multiplies, faith grows. This is a healthy pattern of provision, and we learn how to live in abundance. Tithing helps break the scarcity cycle by refocusing our attention on God's provision. It puts the focus back on God and allows us to see his faithfulness in action. This is what he's talking about in Matthew chapter 6. Look how he promises he'll take care of us. It's the promise of provision. Can't love God and money. You can't serve God and be enslaved to money. That was verse 24. Look at verse 25. He says, that's why I tell you not to worry about everyday life. Whether you have enough food or drink or enough clothes to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? And here he starts dropping some examples. Look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for your heavenly Father feeds them. And here's the value statement. Aren't you more valuable to him than they are? And then he drops wisdom. Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? Here's another example. Why worry about clothing? Look at the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work. They don't make clothing. Yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully for wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, he will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? Then he tries to encourage us. He challenges us and then he encourages us. So don't worry about these things. Saying, what do we eat? What do we drink? What do we wear? These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers. There's a hard sentence. These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers, but your heavenly Father already knows your needs. Now here's verse 33. Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything that you need. Put God first. Be faithful with obedience, and then he will provide everything that you need. We're going to be patient with provision. We don't have to worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today. Scarcity says that there isn't enough, and we can't trust God to provide. Scarcity says we have to be afraid and grab everything that you can. Scarcity says don't give to God what's his because it's really yours. Scarcity says we trust money. We trust the spirit of mammon more than Jesus. Scarcity says that we belong to money, not to Jesus. That's idolatry. But trusting Jesus by breaking the cycle of scarcity with the tithe, that says I know I belong to Jesus. I'm his. So I'm going to put God first in everything. I'm going to trust God with the tithe because it's all his anyways. And if it's all his, God already provided once, he's going to do it again. That's what he does. So I will be faithful with obedience, and I'll be patient with provision. Would you just even say that out loud with me today? Can we just calibrate under that? I will be faithful with obedience and patient with provision. I'm going to see it again and again and again. Every time God provides, I'm going to be faithful to give him what's his. God provides, I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to keep my heart right every single time. It's not optional for me. I'm pre-deciding right now what's going to happen. God provides, I respond with obedience. I'm faithful with my obedience, and I'm going to see my good God multiply what I add. I'm going to watch my faith grow because I'm faithful with my obedience. And because we're faithful with obedience, we're going to see God work in provision. We just have to be patient. Some of you are thinking right now, like, I don't have to do anything. No. I'm going to be obedient. I'm going to do what he asked me to do. So I'm going to work like he asked me to work. And then I'm going to wait on God's provide. I'm not going to give into the spirit of money. I'm not going to make my own way by making more and more debt. I'm going to act with the wisdom that he's given me and then watch how he delivers as I walk in obedience and patience. He's going to deliver peace because I'm not worried about what I don't have. He's going to deliver provision because I'm faithful and obedient. When I put God first, he's faithful to give me everything I need. He's my good shepherd. Psalm 23, he is my shepherd. I have all that I need. So we put God first in everything we do. We're going to be faithful with our obedience, and we're going to be patient in provision. And when we do that, when we learn how to live in abundance allows us to lead the way in generosity. So come back next week. Next week is the fun conversation. It's the generosity talk. It's my favorite part of the talk. But the order matters. The order matters. We're going to put God first. We're going to be faithful with obedience, and we're going to be patient with provision.